What is up, you guys? Hi, FPV here with Jack's 3D Printing, Quad Fellas, and Banff Decals, building up the Triton from Jack's 3D Printing. Super excited for this frame. It's going to be freaking awesome. As you guys can see, just a little bit longer than the Banger frame. Definitely meant for your digital air systems and your CADX systems and stuff like that, but is going to be a super fun frame to see. As you guys can see laid out, it's going to be super fun. Just the ESC and the flight controller and everything all lined out, and it's really well thought out. As you guys can see just a second ago, super easy to take out your arms, and you don't even have to disturb the stack. Found when you're putting a camera in here, if it's full size, you guys kind of want to just basically put the camera in between the 3D mounts and then screw that down to the frame. Just makes it a little easier. You just got to give them a little bit of a pinch to make it fit, but you still get all the angles that you need, and it's all nice and safe. So once I figure out all of that kind of stuff, I basically like to mock up a quad and just make sure that I got all of the screws and everything like that, all the correct size and everything, and just make sure that everything fits where it's supposed to. And then I kind of map out all the wiring in my head and figure out where I'm going to be putting all of that stuff. So there's going to be a lot of taking things off and putting things on as I kind of go through this. This is the first time that I built this frame. Here you can see I'm kind of measuring up all the rest of the wires, camera wire, capacitor wire, all that kind of stuff, looking at the harnesses, where the Crossfire Nano is going to go, and all of that kind of stuff. So once I kind of figure that out in my head, I kind of start placing some of the main items onto the frame, like the flight controller here. I'm going to go ahead and get mounted up, and then I'm going to figure out, you know, how much wire I need to get from that to the ESC and from the VTX and all of that stuff. You can see here kind of stretching that camera wire to see where it fits, and I'm going to go ahead and throw the flight controller back on here again and get everything kind of squared away with how that is going to be and where the spacing is going to be on that. And usually I use like an O-ring if they've got the soft mounting on there. It just kind of helps elevate the flight controller up just a little bit so I can get some wires passed underneath and have them not touching the flight controller. That way they're not, you know, interfering with it or anything like that. And so I'm going to be trying to run all of my wires as clean as possible, but also as functional as possible. So, you know, that way if I break something, it's easy to get in there and it's easy to, you know, get it worked on, but it still looks decent. You know, that's part of the game. You still got to look good while you're doing it. And just measuring out, you know, where things are going to go now, the Crossfire, the VTX pigtail, all that kind of stuff, and starting to strip wires off for the Crossfire Nano now that I've got that put up under there. And all of these components came off of another rig that was working fabulous, and so I know that they all work. I've just got to, you know, wire them all up just like they were before. So just consulting my phone there, looking at the pictures real quick, just making sure that I get everything back onto the right pads. You know, it's going to be a super easy build, honestly, since I've already built up all of these components before, which is also super nice, you know, and you can just go into a build with a little bit of confidence. It's always nice. But got the Nano all wired up here and all soldered in, and I think everything looks good there. So I'm going to go ahead and secure the Crossfire down with a little piece of VHB and get that mounted into where it's going to go. That way I can start passing the rest of the wires and things that I need to do with that. And I also like to make my VHB pads just a little bigger than the actual unit itself. Just make sure that you get all the grounding, you know, and isolation that you're supposed to. So here I'm running the ground wire and the power wire that's going to go from the ESC straight to the VTX. It's a HV, so I like running HV if I can. So my camera, the VTX, and all of that stuff gets powered directly from the ESC. That way there's no power loss from the flight controller because it's trying to power something, or the VTX getting interference because it's trying to power something. Everything's got its own dedicated power running directly to it, which always gives you a nice clean video and just gives your components an easier time operating without having to, you know, deal with interference and everything. So here you guys can see I'm just kind of loosening everything up and just routing the wires where I think that they should go, making sure that, you know, they clear that flight controller, they're not binding on it, making sure that that pigtail is passing where it needs to go and that it's going to be able to plug into the VTX and doesn't have any interference with that flight controller. You know, checking the flight controller, making sure it's still got that little bit of wiggle and isolation from the frame. And so now I'm just going to secure down some of these wires that are going to be running under here, and this will just kind of keep them isolated, keep them where they're supposed to be, and give me a little bit of protection from the ESC from those metal inserts that are in the frame there in case something happens, you know. But now I'm just going to be running wires, and this is the camera wire here. You guys can see I'm going to lengthen it up a little bit, and if I ever run them over or under an ESC, I like to shield them with like an extra little piece of shrink wrap on top of the piece of shrink that I've already done for the joint there, and that'll just give a little isolation from the frame, from the ESC, from resonances and RF signals and all that kind of stuff. So you can see here just putting some of that shrink wrap on there, and now getting that larger piece that's going to be going underneath the ESC, just getting that shielded. And that'll just give me some nice clean video, you know, without getting any of the weird lines or, you know, anything like that in there. Another thing I do as well for getting nice clean video is I run a lot of redundant grounds. You guys will see I'm going to run some grounds from the flight controller to the actual ground wire that is going to the ESC, and from the camera that's all going to be hooked up into the same ground, so everything all gets ground together, and that way you're just guaranteed to have, you know, a nice clean OSD, nice clean video, and nice clean power to everywhere. So here I'm just going to finish wiring up some of the flight controller and get the wires soldered in there. And always important, you guys twist your wires, get a little bit of flux on the end of those things and tin them up. Makes it a heck of a lot easier. It makes it look a lot nicer as you're wiring them up. So here I'm just going to kind of get all of the ground wires all wired in together, all passed in, and just kind of in one unit. And again, that's just going to ensure that everything is all ground together and I've got nice clean video. There's no way that the ground wire that goes from your ESC to your flight controller is enough to support everything that we need and that we are asking of our quads and our electronics these days, you know, especially pushing, you know, 6S and running, you know, upwards of 40-50 amp bursts and stuff like that. You know, you need the extra ground wires, you know, to make sure that everything can play nice and that everything has got enough relief from all of that extra power that it's got to go. So along with that, make sure you guys run a nice capacitor as well. In most of my builds, I only run one. I just run the 1000 UHF 35 volts in most of my builds, and that seems to do the trick for most of my stuff. In my long range rig, which I'm setting up, I might put a couple extra little ESCs going out to the motors just to make sure that everything is nice and super clean. But other than that, you know, just make sure that you got all your ground wires run the right way. Make sure, you know, all of your hardware is in there the right way. And here I'm just test fitting the ESC, just making sure that everything is run the right way, making sure all the wires are routed where they're supposed to be and they're not getting interference or getting pinched by the flight controller. So I'm going to go ahead and get the ESC mounted up here. And now that I've got the ESC on there, I'm going to go ahead and start test fitting the VTX. You can see it taking a little bong break there to clear my head, make sure everything goes nice, and stripping out wires and pre-tinning stuff, just making sure I get everything on there. And I'm going to use some extra long wire here for a little bit. That way I can be guaranteed that once I get everything together, I've got the correct length and I can get it all routed where it's supposed to go. You can see they're pulling all the wire out where it should be, and you can see I used quite a bit of extra wire, but I can always just snip that off and throw that back into my little wire bin that you guys saw earlier. Always keep your wires from all your builds and stuff. It's definitely going to help you out later down the road. And I always check the conductivity of my wires that are in there too, just to make sure that there's no breaks in the wires before I install them, because that'd be a pain in the ass. You can see me here just cleaning off the flight controller with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. This is 99% rubbing alcohol. Just kind of dissolves all of the flux and any dirty stuff that might be on there, any little solder balls that might have ended up on there get cleaned off, and it preps it for conformal coating. I like to conformal coat all of my rigs. So here I'm just kind of test fitting the harness from the flight controller to the ESC, and I'll be honest here, I was kind of trying to rush this because I was on video and I bent a couple of pins, so you'll see me fiddling with this here, and then I actually have to go back with an X-Acto knife and I get in there and I straighten those pins back out and then get that harness in there. It didn't do any damage or anything like that, but just be aware that sometimes while you guys are doing this stuff, if you push a harness in there like slightly sideways or something, you could bend some pins. So just be aware of that stuff. Take your time, you know, get that stuff in there nice and straight. You know, it's super easy to fix, but you know, just super easy to avoid as well. And as you can see here, more of my head as I'm trying to just kind of get things fixed in. And you know, I was really struggling with this, and I was like, why is this harness not going in as well? Because I was trying to rush stuff on video and bend some pins. So I'll let you guys enjoy the struggle here for a minute, and I'll come back to you here in a sec. Alright, so here I'm explaining, I cut the video and I went back and I, straightened out those pins in there and I got the harness all back in the way that it's supposed to be. So back on schedule, back doing what we're supposed to do now. I'm going to loosen up the flight controller stack here so that I can get wires and stuff kind of passed underneath and routed the right way before I get it cinched down and mount this VTX on here. So rushtank mini, I really like these VTXs, super easy to wire up. I love the HV, I love the outputs on them. I love the way that they go. Just a super nice ESC that I've really enjoyed using and just been awesome to use. Just absolutely love them. Rushtank Ultimate is awesome too, but the Rushtank Mini just does all the same exact stuff, and it's that super small 20 by 20 stack size, which was awesome. It allowed me to get the VTX in the back over here, up on top of the flight controller. So you guys can see me wiring stuff in here, and I'm kind of anal about how I do all my soldering and stuff. These wires were a little too long, so you'll see me remove them and go ahead and re-solder them on there again. And then I'll just get everything else connected, and that'll be the VTX connection that I've got done on there. Just make sure you guys give yourself, enough wire, but not, so much as there's a whole, rat's nest inside your build, but you want a little bit extra so you can move things around. That way, in the event of a crash, something like that, you need to just remove your, VTX from over the top of your flight controller or something like that. You've got enough wire, and you're not gonna stress and pop joints by just trying to move things. So you can see me here just kind of connecting some of the last wires, the smart audio and the redundant ground and stuff like that, getting those hooked up on there. And I'll be honest, I was rushing these a little bit, and the first time I plugged it in, I had just like the tiniest whiff of smoke, and I actually just pulled it really fast. I have a smoke stopper, but sometimes that's, not quite enough, but figured out where it was coming from, and it was the tiniest little touch of solder on the VTX from the 5 volt and the ground, because I had plugged an LED into that spot and kind of kind of LED, I can't even fucking talk. I soldered them up a little bit sloppy, which is not like me, but I was trying to put multiple wires in one little pad and ended up having to go back and just took those off and moved them around and cleaned it all up and got that all corrected, and didn't do anything to the VTX, which also speaks to how tough these rushtank VTXs are. It took a little bit of a short a couple of times so I could figure out exactly where that was coming from, but it held it, and the VTX is working perfectly. So here you see me getting ready with the rubbing alcohol again to clean everything off. Just kind of one final little clean before I put it all back together and get everything all fit inside the quad. So just checking all my wires, making sure everything is routed right, making sure nothing's pinched, making sure everything's free the way that it should be, making sure that nothing's going to be bumping into that flight controller, messing with the gyro or anything. That way I've got, nice clean feeds coming from all of that, and just a nice clean running quad. So really the last thing left to do after I get the everything mounted up is to get the motors on here and to get those soldered up, and that will be about it. So I broke for lunch at this point, and you guys can see everything kind of soldered up on that point. And this is me just securing the VTX pigtail, and I put a little bit of E6000 in there, kind of pinched them together, and then I used one of the nuts that would traditionally go on there to tighten it all up and make it all super nice and tight. And then I just kind of waited for that E6000 to dry. That way I didn't have to put any screws on there or anything like that. Just one less thing to worry about if I'm going to service it. And here I'm just pulling off the camera so that I can access the leads and everything like that a little bit easier. And I'm going to start soldering on the actual positive and negative that are going to be going to the battery, and then wiring in the VTX positive and negative, and the rest of the wires that are going to be going directly onto the ESC itself. So this is just kind of the prep work, getting ready to do that, making sure that everything is mounted up where it's going to be, and then I'll start to strip the ends of all the wires and get them all tinned up, and figuring out where I'm going to be putting those on, as well as the capacitor. So here I'm going to go ahead and start getting these mounted, and this is going to be a little bit different, so I'm going to have them come off the side. So I'm going to correct the angle of the ground wire here in a minute. I'll actually have to snip off a little bit so that it fits properly, but you guys can see there it's going to be coming off to the side. And just remember to make sure that your soldering iron is heated up just a little bit more when you're doing your leads and stuff. That'll help transfer that heat down through that pad a little bit faster. You guys can see it's just kind of in and out. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time, you know, heating up those components and sending heat through the rest of the board. You might damage other components and then get your build finished and figure out that, you know, something was damaged due to you heating it up too much. So here you see me doing the negative wire, and negative wire is always going to take just a tiny bit more heat because the negative is common throughout all the boards. So just make sure you guys, you know, turn up your iron, make sure you get some flux on there, and then, you know that that ground is just going to take a tiny split second longer than that positive was going to take. So you can see me getting everything all attached here. That's all the wires that need to go on for the VTX, for the camera, for the positive and the negative, and then now I'm going to be attaching the capacitor into the build. And I traditionally like to put the capacitor as close as I can to the ESC, but I don't like using the capacitor leads. I always end up using an extra piece of wire and attach that in there. That way it's got a little flexibility as to where it goes in the build, and as well as it gives me a little bit of strength and peace of mind. So I was testing the whole build out right there with the multimeter, making sure that I didn't have any shorts, and then just making sure I get this all placed where it needs to be, and putting the capacitor in so that I've got enough room for the camera and all of that stuff. So I'm going to get some wires all cleaned up here. This is for the LED that I'm going to be putting underneath the trunk. I've got some RGB LEDs, and I'm going to start playing a lot more with the LEDs and putting them into my build. It makes for nice follow footage and you know, things like that, for just for everything. Just kind of fun having them on there, and I like to use them for like an arm and a disarm. So make sure again you guys are isolating your boards from there. This whole LED's got some shrink wrap around it, and I'm using the VHB to secure it down to the quad. Stuff's not going to go anywhere once you get that secured on there, and it just makes it nice and easy. You guys can see just super clean, one LED strip on there, super bright, and just going to run that through. And that's actually powered right off of the VTX. It has a 5-volt out, so that's the only thing it's powering is going to be those LEDs, but it hasn't given me any issues or anything, no, you know, video interference from that. And so you can see me here just wiring that up to the VTX, which was nice because I didn't have to put in a 5-volt BEC or any of that extra kind of stuff into the build. It just made it nice and super clean and super dependable. And it's one of those things that eventually I'll probably be putting a reel pit into every one of my things, and then I can wire up my LEDs and all that kind of stuff to the reel pit so that they turn on and off with a switch, which is really nice. My buddy Zane Stapleton, who's also a Quad Fellas pilot, our racer, and also won freestyle for West Coast Throwdown in 2020. It was pretty awesome to watch him do. But anyway, he's the guy who you know, showed me how to use reel pit and that kind of stuff, and inspiration for that. So I'm definitely going to be throwing reel pit into a lot more of my builds here coming up. But you can see me here just fiddling with the last of the connections, just making sure that everything is done the right way. And I kind of decided to, because the rush tank has pads on the top and the bottom, I just kind of made it a little easier and put some of them on the top and some of them on the bottom, just to make the soldering a little easier, so there weren't so many wires going to just one pad in one spot. So here, putting the VTX back on there, and again, like I said, I like to screw the screws in. I don't like to turn the nuts, that way you're not going to knock anything off your board or anything like that. Makes it really super nice and easy, and just makes it nice and clean. You can feel the tension when that gets nice and tight, and you know, you don't want to put a whole ton of tension on these things, just enough to get them held down, and then just like a, you know, quarter turn just to get them, you know, really put on there. I also use Loctite on all of my joints for, you know, my flight controller and for my motors and all of that kind of stuff. Just gives you that peace of mind knowing that your screws and stuff like that are not going to back themselves out. So here, just a little piece of VHB, and I'm securing that capacitor down, just making sure that it finds its home. And then I'll put the camera back into the build here, just making sure that I got enough wire to mount that up on there. And so here's the finished product of that. You guys can see. And I'm gonna get the motors all mounted up onto the frame, and that'll be the last thing. You guys can kind of see the motors already here on the frame and some of that finished up, but here the motors are on, and the last thing I need to do is just kind of strip out some new wire and then attach them to the motor wires themselves. Like I said, this came from a different build before, and so the motor wires weren't cut to the right length, so I just cut them shorter and ran some extra lines, extra wires, that way everything could be nice and clean, and it actually ended up working really well. I liked the way that it turned out because I was able to just solder the wires directly to the ESC without having any pull from the motor or anything like that, and then I was able to just connect those right up to the motor wires themselves, and then just basically finish the build at that point. Then it was just isolating, making sure I got my shrink wrap on there, isolating everything, and then just cleaning up all the rest of the build. So I'm just going to let you guys enjoy the last couple of minutes of me just stripping wires and cutting wires to length and everything here. But that's basically it for the build. I ended up not filming the last of it because the GoPro died. This was about 6 hours of build footage that I compressed down to about 21 minutes or so. So you guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed this build video. It was definitely a work of love. Jack, thank you so much for sending these to me and sponsoring me and letting me do this kind of stuff. It's just an absolute pleasure to do. And now my job is to go out and smash this thing around. And oh boy, have I already gone out and smashed this thing around. It is dirty as hell as I'm looking at it right now, and I definitely need to go buy some more props because I definitely opened myself up by smacking it around a little bit more, and having the freedom to do that is really nice. So thank you, Jack, again. Thank you to all the rest of my sponsors. Banff Decals, Nathan Baker of Banff Decals, you are a badass. Thank you, man. Daryl Noddings of Quad Fellas, my sponsor for Quad Fellas. Just can't say enough about you, man. I love you guys. All of you, all my sponsors. This has just been an awesome ride. So thank you, everybody, from the bottom of my heart. Remember to like and subscribe if you like this video. Definitely help me out, get me some more views. But nothing but love for you guys and the whole FPV community. This Triton is just going to be awesome, and I cannot wait to bring you guys a whole bunch more videos. Nothing but love. IAFPV. I am out.